The news today, the Home Secretary has announced medical products derived from cannabis will be made available on prescription by the autumn. It comes after a review into the medicinal use of the drug was commissioned last month. Earlier, the Home Office Minister Nick Hurd told Sky News the rule change has been inspired by high-profile cases of unwell children.
Having met the parents of the most recent high-profile cases, it was absolutely impossible not to be deeply moved by what they've had to go through to try and access medicines they think are absolutely critical to the well-being of their loved ones. And the Home Secretary and I just came out of that process feeling, we're in the wrong place. It's time to stop needless suffering because of rules and processes that feel out of date. Obviously, we're politicians, not doctors, so we went and got advice from experts. They concluded the same thing.
Well, let's bring in our health correspondent, Paul Kelso. Paul, good news for campaigners, but long overdue?
Certainly the campaigners would say that. I think plenty of other people would too. The government has made this decision, I think, with a concession that they're behind the times, and certainly that's where the medical evidence, certainly around the world, has been. But this has moved with pretty dizzying speed. We're talking about a period of 6 weeks since the case of Billy Caldwell really became of course, celeb for those campaigning for medical use of cannabis. His mother took him to Canada, but he suffers from epilepsy and his seizures are significantly eased, she says, by the administration of medical cannabis. Took him to Canada because her doctor would no longer provide her with what she required in Belfast, and was then stopped at Heathrow, essentially challenging the border authorities to allow her into the country with the medicinal cannabis. It was taken away. That became a very difficult position for the Home Secretary because the sympathy, not just the sympathy, also the medical opinion was on her side. There's been a review by the Chief Medical Officer. Cannabis was reclassified last week, opening the door for the Home Secretary to make this formal move that it can be prescribed. But there will be a process first. This won't happen overnight.
I was going to say, how will it work in practice?
So the first thing that will happen is that the Home Secretary is going to ask for a definition to be compiled of what counts as medically useful, medically helpful cannabis substances. And that could be another point of contention. It could be a very narrow definition, which campaigners will say will not be good enough. There are enormous amounts of medical cannabis out there around the world that hasn't been through, not all of it, through the clinical trials that are associated and necessary for drugs to be sold here. So how broad that definition is set will be a point of contention, but there will be a clear definition. Certain substances will pass that definition. They will be clear for prescription, and that, the government says, will begin in September. They're very, very clear. They say this is not the first step to the legalisation of cannabis for recreational use. Well, the Home Secretary would say that, wouldn't he? And I'm sure he means it, but it's interesting. You go through the list of countries where cannabis is available for medical use, almost none of them have not decriminalised recreational use sometimes afterwards.
Let's see what happens. OK, Paul, thank you.